Yo guys, welcome to the last lap. Don't forget to drop a lovely, juicy 5-star rating if you're watching on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. In terms of Charles, 100%, maybe slightly over the line, maybe too often driving style. If you're Fred Vasseur, are you saying anything to Charles? Are you trying to dial him back, or are you just letting him? Because Charles on his day has the ability to, over a lap, arguably be quicker than anyone on the grid.
Yes. And I think, his breakout season was 2019, coming in, alongside Vettel and, taking it with him toe to toe. Obviously, some Vettel fans will say that, Vettel was better over the course of the season. But, if we look at it, I guess, holistically, the two main races where I guess he took the mantle of, the lead driver in Ferrari were Monza and, Spa. And obviously, Monza was the big one, having not won a race Ferrari hadn't won a race in Monza since 2010 with Fernando Alonso, which was, was huge.
That's when he did that naughty squeeze on
Lewis, the naughty squeeze, yeah. I mean, but I pretend I don't see. But
I prefer not to speak.
Yeah, but and then in 2020 again, they had they didn't have the best car. They obviously that was the illegal engine talk at the time. But he's proved himself in a car that's not necessarily the best. Some things he did in 2020 were ridiculous. You'd see obviously Lewis, Bottas, Verstappen, and then you kind of see Leclerc and especially Portimao was one of them, where he had really good tire management and I think he's evolved as a driver.
Well, I mean, even 2018, Sauber, I think pretty sure he ended the season with 3 P7s.
Yeah.
So 3 best of the rest in a Sauber.
Yeah. In a Sauber. He was already, coming into his own. And I think, 2021 was again, kind of a bit of a transitional year. They'll focus more on 2022. But I don't know, it's more of I hate, shifting the blame, because I do like holding people accountable when they're, to blame for something, yesterday was obviously 100% his fault. But, the pressure that is on him, from not just, within Ferrari, but, from the media and the fans, the Tifosi themselves, they look up to him and they're they expect him to do to basically, carry them into the kind of the next era. But, when you have Red Bull who are doing so well, I think it's difficult to say how well he would have done had he not had those issues, the strategical errors they had.
He wouldn't have won the championship.
Obviously, he wouldn't have won the championship
without his own mistakes.
It would have been closer.
I think though, I would say though that I think all the drivers do have the same pressure, because you can apply. I know you're speaking of the Tifosi there, but you can also have the same with Lewis Hamilton and who he wants to represent. You got Alex Albon wanting to represent his country where we hasn't been racing. You do have. Every driver's got that thing, and I don't think that's the only biting point for it. And I don't think that's when he's trying to do his best in qualifying and pushing too much that he's thinking, I need to prove myself for the Tifosi. I don't think that's the case, because I think every driver has that same amount of pressure. I think what's happening is that he's just going too far with it, and that's what all the circumstances we've ever seen it is where he's either braked a bit too much, like going into Baku with a classic meme for that, or going over the curb because he's trying to because he's just trying to find these little things of those little edges to get past it, and it's all those little mistakes where it's him just going over the mark and not. I don't think it's pressure, because apart from France, where he was already when he was leading and then went out on his own accord, maybe that was down to it. But with these other examples, I think it's where he is just pushing a bit too much for it. Because he knows the car isn't that good. He's comfortable knowing that he is the number one driver in that car. That's kind of a given. You can just watch it, see any sort of race weekend. But I think here, this is where he's been knocked of his confidence in practice and qualifying, and we've seen that reflected in the race where he was clearly a lot slower than Sainz was, because he didn't want to risk it too much. Because if he was to crash in this race, then he would just feel embarrassed for.
Well, I think that weekend of pain, isn't it? Even the battles with K-Mag, I was sort of he was getting
he's just trying to keep it.
He was
clean.
he was trying to keep it clean, but he was getting peppered.
Yeah.
Because you'd make an overtake and K-Mag was like, no.
Do you think there's a bit of a tendency to nitpick though? To look at certain, incidents, because let's not forget Miami was a different. Everyone was having different. It's only that Leclerc's was the most spectacular. It was like the biggest, but there were people going off at Checo clipped the wall. I think going into I don't remember turn 4, just like on entry. He didn't, obviously he ended up being able to get away from that, but Leclerc didn't. Obviously, he pushed that little bit too far.
I think Charles Leclerc's. What I will say is, I think Charles Leclerc's accidents are spectacular.
They are, yeah.
Every time.
They're big.
As soon as there's a mistake, that's like he does not go half measures. No,
Yeah.
he fucks it. Like he slaps it in the barrier. So. Like we see Max make mistakes every now and again, But it's very rarely. Obviously, he spun at Hungary last year just randomly for no reason, like the Jeddah qualifying lap and stuff. So, like everyone does make mistakes. Everyone will fuck up at some point. I just think Charles are so spectacular.
It's the outcome that's remembered,
and the outcome.
Yeah, and it's also like
it feels like he's bottling it a little bit,
and it also depends on the session because, obviously, in the free practice sessions, that's where you are trying to push the limit to find what that limit is, and if you go a bit too far over, cool. I know now I need to rein it back in a little bit. Yeah. But with Leclerc's one, it's always at the worst possible moments, whether it's a qualifying or the race. If you spin it during the practice session, what have you, that's fine because then you got your other tyres you can go on to, or you keep running them down. But with Leclerc's one, it's very much like, all right, I'm fully going into the barriers here, or I'm carrying on with my race.
Yeah, it's even like Monaco. Like he lost a pole and probably guaranteed win because of a mistake.
Yeah,
because he pushed it too much. Yeah,
Paul Ricard, he was probably going to lose the lead, but lost second. Imola lost like crazy amounts of points.
So I heard Charles was talking after qualifying, and he was saying that there was a degree of acceptance on his side. It's like, I am the driver who can get pole positions ahead of Red Bulls, looking at where they are right now, but sometimes this is the byproduct of that. But he puts his hand up, takes responsibility for it. I'm just trying to remember, last season, first half of the year, that Ferrari was on pace with the Red Bull, and there were some quality battles between him and Max. Imola, I remember that one, obviously. He was having to pick his way back through the field, so he was pushing 100%, and then pushed 101% and spun. And then France, even France, I don't think he would have won that race. He knew he had to drive at 100% every single lap to have any chance of winning.
Yeah.
I think if you give Charles a car that doesn't necessitate him to drive 100% every single lap, because I think as long as he's not got a championship fighting car, that's just who he is. He will drive at 100%.
Yeah.
And he will often overstep. Yeah. If you give him a car like Max has got right now, or Lewis had for years, he doesn't need to drive at 100%. And then I think you get an incredible driver. Yeah. I just think when he's playing catch up, he plays catch up at 100%, and sometimes he's going to overstep.
And that's where you look at the Red Bull drivers, where I don't think Max Verstappen is driving at 100% the entire time.
He doesn't need to.
Yeah, because he doesn't need to, because the car's working underneath him. So you got Sergio Perez, who'd be I don't know, let's say driving 85% of it, as much as he could do, and then you got Max who's doing it at 95. And if you're constantly driving at 100%, then your percentage of crashing or making incidents or whatever it could be, it's going to go so high because you're really pushing it. Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the one bit where we do see when it works really well, where drivers are really praised and such for it. We've seen it with Hamilton many times before, when he's done incredible racecraft and such, where it's like, I can't remember which race it was, but it's even when you're driving in the wet or anything, if you make one little mistake, that's your race completely gone. You've got to be super hyper focused into it. But I think with Leclerc, it basically determines if this is going to happen any more times in the next 3 races. These next 3 races,
it will.
Yeah, but it's the thing.
There's no faith.
If he crashes in the next 3 races, this is going to be one of a huge. And I know we were kind of talking a bit earlier about it because it's happened twice in Miami during practice and quali. But if he crashes in the next 3 races, it's going to really.
It's actually important. Yeah, totally. If he crashes out in a race,
not for budget reasons or anything, but it's more that's when it's right. You keep pushing it too much now. You need to
just have to rein it back.
You need to rein it in. But then what's happened here? He's reined it in at Miami, and because of that, he's got a pretty crappy result.
If you think about 2018 Verstappen as well, I think we were having the same conversations pretty much. You know, a little bit too overambitious. You know, trying too much, trying too hard, and crashed in. I think the last straw for Verstappen was probably Monaco, because from that point, and then there was obviously Canada, and he said like the whole headbutt thing. But from that point on, he was like ridiculous. Like, I mean, he only ever had, I can't remember how his 2018 post Canada went, but I just remember him being like on the podium way more consistently, and he tamed that aggression and that basically that want and desire to basically, I want to get where I want to go now. I want to basically push in 110% as what we've been saying with Leclerc. And so I think Christian Horner at the start of 2022 said something that was like, I think quite accurate in this case. I'd rather make a fast car reliable than a slow car, than an unreliable car. I'd rather make.
I know where this is going.
It's like, I'd rather make have a driver who's
fast.
Exactly. I'd rather have a driver who has that natural talent and natural ability.
Charles got the ingredients.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. I think all of the greats. You look through the Schumacher, Senna, Hamilton, whoever. Like all of these greats have that uncompromising. I just think. I think if the circumstances are right for Charles, I think he can deliver. I just think he's not great in a car that's like Gunter wouldn't like Charles.
That's why it wouldn't have gone well if he'd actually gone to Haas. The testing for them and stuff. So that would have been, goodness gracious.
Yeah, that would have been a shocker. One other thing I did want to ask actually, I was thinking of asking this during the stream and I was like, no, I think this deserves a bit more time because we look at the current field of 20 drivers in F1 and, I don't think we'll ever have the 20 best drivers because there's always going to be a degree of money in the way, right? Yeah. But I think the driver is less important than ever in F1 because I think the standards are so high. I think if you put any combination of the top 6 drivers in F1 into that Red Bull, I think whether it's say George and Charles or whether it's Lewis and Checo or whoever into that Red Bull, I still think the Red Bull is clear because I just think...
Oh, yeah, massively. I honestly, you could extend that to like the top 12.
Yeah, and that's not always been the case because I think sometimes when there's been, even like, early, mid-2000s, the quality gap, I think, was quite big between drivers. So you could have a driver compensate and do bits. I think now it's all about the car than the driver because I just think all the drivers are so good now.
We need the Stig back. This is what we need. Get him to drive every F1 team's cars. Actually, see
everyone go back on Top Gear for that.
Like, everyone do that. Yeah.
But do you think that's? Do you think that rings true?
I fully 100% agree. Yeah. It's more like. Yeah, it's just the team's resources compared like the factory of like Red Bull to Haas. It's completely different in terms of like what they can bring to the table, and it's reflective. The drivers can be as great as it can be. You can have Max Verstappen driving the Haas round. It's still not going to be like in the top 5. You can just.
Then again, that kind of it's always been a thing in Formula One. I guess it's not as.
It's not really a meritocracy.
Yeah, the thing is, I guess you had bigger gaps, and you did, to be fair, have some shitter drivers in like the early 2000s and stuff. I think now, like you look at even guys that are rocking around at the back of the grid, like De Vries has won like 2 FIA championships.
Yeah, exactly.
Sargent like almost won F3 and like did relatively well in F2 and stuff like this. Has been like karting world champion.
Yeah.
Like everyone's got a good CV now.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I do hear that.
Like even if you're like a top best driver in the world, like the gap between you and the slowest driver in F1 is smaller than it's ever been.